So now we are ready to roll. All right, so we talked about a couple of things here, just some objects. Now let's talk about a couple of things that we need to know CAD-wise real quick. First of all is how do you select an object to look at its properties? If you click on it, put the crosshairs over it and just click once with the left mouse, and you're going to see some little indicators pop up. Those are called grips, and they're going to be different based on what you have selected. So that's one way, and you press escape to clear it. If you click on one and then click on another one, you keep adding to the selection set. So you see right now I've got two things selected, excuse me. And if I have my properties open, I can look up here and see that I have two things selected. And I see that they're both polylines because it says polyline, two of them. And if I select this circle, I now see that I have three things selected, but now it says all three. I've got a circle and I've got two polylines. So those selected together, and if I change their color, for instance, to yellow, and their line weight to something that you can see, notice that they change all together because I've chosen those two things. If I choose the circle, then whatever I change here is only going to affect the circle. Okay. If I pull this down and choose all three, then only the properties that are common to all three types of things you have selected are things you can change. For instance, you can change the color to, let's choose this select color and we'll get this sort of, this little orangey looking color here, 40. So notice they all three changed, but if it's something that you can change all three together, but if they're not the same value, you're going to see that word varies. And so you could change it so now it's on a different layer. We have to type in a number there. We're just going to type, let's leave it as 20 so the circle stays the same. And we'll change its color to be by layer. And its line type is by layer. And line weight is also by layer. I must have missed, yeah, I missed these two things, line type scale. Funny, I didn't hit enter. Okay, so that's a couple of ways you can select things. You just keep clicking. And if you need to unselect something, you can hold the shift key down and click it again, and it unselects it. Notice the count keeps changing as I do that. Okay, so those are a couple of ways of selecting something. Now, you press escape to clear the selection. Now there's two other, well, there's more than two, but there's two main other ways of selecting something. If you click the mouse left button, let it up after you've clicked it, and now move the mouse toward the right. That is what's called a select by window And what you select has to be completely in the window. So if I do it like this, and I intended to get all three of those, if I click here now, the only thing that gets selected is that circle because it was fully in that window. I would have to do this to get everything all at the same time. But there's another direction is if you click somewhere in space, let the mouse button up and move it to the left, this is what's called a crossing selection. So that means all you have to do is have crossed the object with the window and you click again. So now it's selected those two, but not the circle. Okay, if I click and cross here, or if I click and go down this way to cross, that's another way of selecting. So you can go all the way around, or you can just cross it or include it. Okay. Now, what was I going to talk about next? Oh, I wanted to show you where you can learn some of these CAD basics and fundamentals. So get familiar with this, and it's on your help menu. And if you go to the Carlson manual and you look at the table of contents and you scroll down here to the bottom, and there's a section called tutorials. And if you click that open, there's an entire section called CAD basics. Now you can see it's got something about here, the CAD basics, and it's pretty extensive. I'll expand this out a little bit. Talks about starting Carlson. There's your start page, new drawing, open files, etc. The startup wizard, all of this. This talks about the graphical user interface, all the different things that you're going to see, toolbars, ribbons, uh, quick access menus, the icon that tells you what coordinate system, the tabs down here that shows you what layout you're in, and you can get this a little bigger so you can see it there. The command line, the status line, okay? So it's a really nice little ways and talks about now, how do you issue a command? Now, keep in mind, this is just CAD. It has nothing to do with Carlson, although a lot of the things that you do in Carlson, you're going to use these types of commands. Here's some of the keys, what they mean. Enter. When you're required to press enter, you can use the enter key on the keyboard, or you can press the space bar, or you can click the right mouse button. And pressing the enter key will perform different operations depending on your location within a command. If you're in the process of running a command which has no sub options, the enter key will end the command. If you have sub options, and other than the default has not been specified, the enter key will initiate that default sub option. Okay. And we'll talk about the sub options here in just a second when you see it on the command line. All these different things. Cancel a command with the escape key. If you accidentally do something, undo, redo. Navigate within the drawing. You can pan and zoom. Pan means you're going to stay at the same zoom level and just move around horizontally, back and forth, up and down. But zooming lets you zoom in or out. Various transparent commands, sub options, and you'll see those on the command line prompt. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, here's where we're talking about this selection of items. Most commands require the selection of objects. When you need to select objects, it'll prompt you to select objects, or you'll see filter or select entities in IntelliCAD. When you're at this prompt, you need to create a selection set. So you can either pick. That's your single. Do a window, do a crossing. You can type P for previous. So it gets the previous things you selected. Once you're building that set, you can type R to remove or A to add. And also the minus key and the plus key will work the same there as well. How you work on snaps, and snaps are very important because you often need to jump exactly to an end point of a line or the midpoint of something or the center of a circle. And that goes geometrically exactly where that point is. Grips, those are those little blue indicators that you saw when we were selecting those objects, and then how to use grips, different layers. Okay. So this also now has some additional CAD basics. Please consult the introduction section or visit the knowledge base. So if you go to the introduction section, it just, I don't know what that does for you. Not much of anything. Introduction, directory structure, Carlson migration, starting AutoCAD. Let's see, loading menus, command entry. There's your transparent commands that you saw back there in the tutorial. File selector, standard reports, annotated text, etc., etc. Okay. Then, of course, you've got all of these different commands. For instance, you looked at the view menu, the level manager. And so that that's level manager, that should be layer manager is what I'm looking for. Level manager is for microstation files. Let's see here. I don't see. Layer. All right, so the help system is going to give you a lot of information, and I would really focus your viewing down here under tutorials. And there's all kinds of different tutorials for different types of processes in Carlson, like how to enter a deed, how to make a plat, how to do contouring, how to do basic road design with volumes. Okay, so it really gets into some, um, pretty extensive training, and you go through it one, step by step by step. And usually all of these things we're going to give you. See, it says go to this Carlson projects and open up example 2. So it shows you the files that should be installed under Carlson projects by default. Okay, so get familiar with that and learn to use it. It will be a great help. The other help is to go to YouTube under Carlson's channel, look for all kinds of videos there, and they have uh, various categories here. Let's go to Carlson. But not Tucker Carlson, Carlson software. All right, so you can see here, and they've got all kinds of videos. Introduction to Field and Finish, launching Carlson, exploring the menus. That's a great place to start. Carlson Power Tools, that's a great set of um, videos that um, my friend Gary Rosen up in the Massachusetts office puts those together. They're usually little 10-minute videos that shows you how to do certain things. Here's one working with surfaces. And you can see the length, that's like under 10 minutes. Um, so all kinds of various things from beginning things to full-on how do you do it type command tutorials. Template series for a ditch. Design pad template with a civil template in 116, for instance.
In a prior video, we introduced you to design pad template. The results are in the lower left corner. This time, we're going to add a layer of complexity by using a template that we created in Civil to attach to our shape and tie into the existing ground and use the rules in the template. So here we're going to pick our polyline, we're going to pick the existing ground, and then we're going to pick this curb template and attach it to the line. Watch what happens as we do this. We're going to put in a pad elevation here in the middle of the range again, like we did on the introductory one. And immediately, again, it does what it's supposed to with projecting slopes and calculating volume. But let's take a look at the results in the 3D viewer here. And what you're going to see is that we've added this layer of complexity by putting in curb and gutter attached to that line automatically, and it followed the rules of the template as far as how it tied into the existing ground.
Okay, so you see how they are just little quick short videos on specific items. So it's a really great way to help you to learn not just CAD stuff, but there's, I mean, not just Carlson things. There's also some CAD basics out there. So please use those resources. They're there to be able to help you move some things along. Okay. So now what I want to do is let's erase the things that we've drawn. If you've doodled and got a bunch of stuff that you've erased, there's a couple of ways to do that. You can just select something. And by the way, once you select something, you get grips on it. If you hover the mouse over a grip and then click it, you're going to change its location. If I hover here in the middle, you see it moves that whole segment. If I click on the vertex, it moves just that point. You can also hover the mouse and get a little pop-up menu. You can add a vertex, go this way. And we could say, convert that to an arc. Okay, still just a polyline. Now this was done with the draw rectangle command. So you can do things like rotate the whole container. You can grab the corner, the little arrow, and it stays rectangular. But if you grab the rectangular grip, it just does a vertex edit, whereas the arrow keeps the rectangularity of it. So there's just different things. You grab a circle, grab the middle point, grab the middle grip, click on it, let it up, and then move it. Or if you grab one of the points along the circumference and move the mouse now, and then click again, it changes its diameter. So any kind of way that you want to edit something that's drawn in the drawing, you can do it with those grips quite easily. You can also do things like you can select a circle, change its properties. You can change its center X, center Y. So if I choose that center X and type in a number, or if I click that little icon right there, it lets me pick a point. So I'm going to put it down over here in the X direction, but notice when I go over here, see it's changed that location. Do the same thing with the Y, but it follows X and Y. It brings the whole thing around. You can set its elevation by making it, say, 150. And so now that has an elevation of, let's change that back from 150. Let's just make it 50 so it's not so bad. And we'll do a little shortcut trick here. I'm going to hold the shift key down and I'm going to press and hold the wheel on the mouse. I'm going to keep the shift key down and I'm going to press and hold the wheel and then I'm going to move it. And so I'm scrolling that in 3D space. Notice the icon in the lower left corner is changing and I'm rolling this thing around and you can see that one of those things was set to 150 and I let everything up and it stays in this orientation. Let's change this. Let's see, the circle's at 50, so let's change this. We select that polyline and we're going to set its elevation to 75. That's there now. Okay. Shift, wheel, press and roll, and you can see they're all at differing elevations. One's at 0 down here. See, its elevation is 0. The circle elevation, its center is at 50. That's what's its elevation, 50. The polyline has an elevation of 75. Now, you may note that that is still a planar object. It has an elevation from one end to the other that's all 75 all along its length. There's another entity called a 3D polyline. And if we draw one of those, I'm going to go to the draw menu and I'm going to draw a 3D polyline. And I'm going to say, uncheck this prompt for elevation and slope. So it's going to read the elevations. I'm going to say, okay. And now it says pick a point or a point number. So I'm going to hover over this object here. And you see that little red square that lights up? That means I'm going to pick the endpoint. And we'll talk about that in a minute. That's a snap. So I'm going to start there and I'm going to come up and snap to there. And then I'm going to come back here and snap to there, the center of the circle. And let's just go out to say, here, and then finally back to there. Now, when I click that point out there, what happened? If you shift and press up, see it because I clicked an empty space, it read the elevation of 0. So if I put that right on edge, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, look at it from the left side. You see, there's that rectangle that was at with that space point I picked in space at 0, and I went back to my starting point, which was also at 0. Now, you notice up here, I had this little cube showing, so I'm looking at the left. If I click right here, that would be the top. So I'm in top view. I can rotate my view around. I can click on a corner and I'm looking at it from that perspective. See my icons down here and see the cube or an edge, a face, top, bottom, left, right, edges, and corners. Okay. So just a couple of ways to get around in the drawing. Now, part of, like I said earlier this morning about how surveyors tend to work on flat pieces of paper and everything's down at 0. But we're going to learn to use things in 3-dimensional space. And even though we're looking straight down on them, remember, this thing had different elevations for each one of those corners, but it just looks like a flat plane. Okay, so we're going to need to look at these things in 3 dimensions. And you can do it by this little trick, holding the shift key and pressing in the wheel and holding it and moving the mouse around. I'll reset that, go back to top view. Or you can use a Carlson viewer, which is on the view menu. And it's called the 3D view. Now there's two main ones here. There's a drawing viewer and the surface file viewer. It's really just the same viewer, but one asks you for a surface file that you've saved, whereas the drawing viewer asks you to pick objects in the drawing. So if I choose that and it says select entities for the scene, notice down here on my prompt. So what I'm going to select is I could do a crossing, get everything. I could do a window and get everything, or I can type the keyword ALL, which says select all. Notice it tells me, it still asks me to select entities. And it tells me I have 4 things in my set. I've built my selection set. If I type R and hit enter, that means remove. So it says now subtract entities from the selection set. So if I select like that, it's taken those 2 out, and my selection set now says 2, and it still says subtract entities. I type A to add. I'm going to add those back. I'm now back to 4. When you're through selecting, when you finished your selection set, you need to hit enter, which you can hit enter on the keyboard, space bar, or right click the mouse. I'll right click the mouse. And now this little 3D viewer pops up. Now, notice something is missing. I'm going to open this up just a little bit more. You can resize it and reposition it. But notice that this particular rectangle, which was all at 0, is not showing. And that's because I've got this little checkbox that says ignore 0 elevation entities. If I uncheck that, you'll see it. And so now I can use these controls, and we'll learn how to do this when we get further into our surface modeling. We can roll that thing around and get all kinds of stuff on it. We can choose color by elevations. So it goes from lows to highs. You can tell by color what's low and what's high. Okay. Now, once you're done looking at things and manipulating things, you can exit the viewer just by choosing that icon that shows going out the door, or you can close the red X in the upper right corner. So that's just a couple of ways of doing that. So let's go now, and we're going to go into our first exercise here, which is this points exercise. And we've already started a drawing. We might as well just stay in this drawing. We'll use it, but we need to get rid of everything that we've drawn. Now, you could select it and choose the erase command from the edit menu. You can select it and hit the delete key on the keyboard, or you can choose the erase select command, or you can even type down at the command line at the bottom of the screen, erase or delete. So if you erase, now again, I want you to select entity. So you're building a selection set. And again, I'm going to type ALL for all. So I've got everything. I'm finished my selection set. I'm going to hit enter one more time. And now nothing is in my drawing. You can even type the word select, or SELE. And as soon as it finds it unique, there's select. I hit enter. And it says, okay, select entities. And if I type all again and hit enter, it found 2, but 2 were not in the current space. And that means it found something over here in paper space. Okay, but it won't erase them or anything when you select all in this view. Now switch from these tabs at the bottom, model space versus paper space. Paper space is where you can make individual plot sheets, and you can have many of them in a single drawing, and they hold viewports into the model. Okay, so, and we're not really going to get a lot of chance to play with that, but I'll just draw a quick figure here. I'm going to go back to my paper space, and I'm going to see that right there. That's what I just drew, and it's that size because this viewport is set to a particular scale. If I double click inside it, it's as if I'm in my viewport or in my model space, and I can change the scale and then double click outside of it. Now I'm on the paper and not in the model. I can select that and choose a particular standard scale, which is like 1 to 20 maybe. No, that didn't go very well. There you go, 1 to 100. And you can set those scales up, scale to fit, do custom. So that's how you make your plotted drawings. So let's go back to Model tab. I'm going to select it and hit delete just to clear it out. All right, so we're now back to an empty drawing, and we're going to go through this exercise on page 13. So what we need to do now, excuse me, is we have a file in our folder that has coordinate values in it, this exercise 1 coordinates.crd. Remember when we started up with the wizard, it said when we got to it, a coordinate file. And if I look up here at the top stripe of my application window, I see I'm running Carlson Survey 2024 with IntelliCAD and offer resale coordinate CRD class example 1. That was the one that I set. It is now associated with this drawing, but it's empty. I had something pop up on my screen. Sorry about that. So there's nothing in there, and I can tell that if I go to the points menu and I list my points, and I just say list range of points, all points, I'll say okay, and I see, now there's my project, my location, my job number. Remember I typed those in when we first started, and that's all they're used for is to title some of your reports. And you don't have to do them. I never do that, but that can be helpful. But it tells me right here that I have 0 points because there's nothing in that file. Now I'm going to go back because I notice I misspelled MSoft. And I'm going to go to settings, drawing setup. This was the same thing that happened during my wizard. And I can come down here now and change that MNsoft. I'll take the N out and say okay. And now if I go back and run this list points again, it will also say 0, but now it says MSoft because it's reading that from that setting. Okay, so we're going to set this coordinate file now to a different one, exercise 1 coordinates. So if I go to the points menu and I choose set coordinate file, that's going to change it from class example 1.crd to, see, I've got new and existing. So an existing file was exercise 1 coordinates.crd. I'll choose open. Okay, so now I have set my coordinate file that has points in it, but I don't have anything in my drawing yet. Okay, and that's as we expect. So I'll go to points menu and I'm going to list points. And let's I'll click the all button again and we'll say okay. And now you can see I've got 22 different points that have a northing value, an easting value, and an elevation. I don't have any descriptions on those points, so they'll just be blank when you see them. But it tells me I had 22 points. Showed me my minimum, my maximum. Okay, and if I had a missing gap in my sequence, it would tell me what that gap is as well. As long as not, now I'm going to just right click in empty space and I can get access to recent commands or just repeat list points. And you see down here, I said report the range. And then I can say show any notes, any GIS attributes. I can use a different viewer, this report formatter, that sort of stuff. Show your coordinates in inches, how many decimal places you want to see, et cetera, et cetera. You can choose a range based on a range of numbers or within a certain area or within a selection set. If you've chosen them out of the drawing, it will list them. So there's all kinds of flexibility in that and how to do it. But right now, there's nothing in the drawing, right?
I'm not even sure that I have the example one with coordinates file.
Same.
Anybody else with that same issue?
Yep, myself as well.
Okay. How about, can you, would you guys familiar with Zoom much? Things like it.
Other
I
than
want,
Not particularly.
I want one of you to share your screen. So if you, let's say, Jim, go ahead and you do it. If you go back to your Zoom controls and should be a share button at the bottom. You see it?
Yeah.
All right, choose that and then there we go. No, well, now, let me see. All right, so you shared your screen. Now, did you hit once you select it, then choose the share button at the bottom?
I did. So it says I am screen sharing.
You are sharing your screen.
I think I can see a screen.
You know, yeah, there
I
it is.
see his screen now too.
I just had to make it bigger. Okay. So now, a couple things I see on your screen right now is you see this icon down in the corner. You see how it's rotated a little bit and it's crooked.
Right
That's
here.
because that's because you're not looking straight down on it with north pointing up and east pointing to the right. If you go over there and hit the top button,
Yeah, there it
see how
goes.
it's squared it up? Yeah. There's also, you could type a command called plan to do all that as well. All right, so that's that one. Now, if you look up at the top, I can't, oh, there it says coordinate is class example one. You see it up there at the top stripe?
Yep.
So go to the points menu and choose set coordinate file. Yep, past it. It's on up in the first block, right there. Okay. Now, you see the current folder files?
Yep.
There should be example one. Where is it? You're in a different, oh, you're in Carlson projects. You need to be in the folder where you're, that you downloaded. So if you pull that down, all right, you're gonna have to browse for it. And now go out on the system and wherever you put the data set when you downloaded it,
Goes right to this.
did you use that?
Oh,
Did
hold
you,
on.
I'm
You're
sorry,
talking about
when you used the link for the Dropbox to get the data sets,
yeah, I've got exercise one coordinates. That's what I want.
yeah, you must be on a different screen.
Yeah, hold on, I'll drag it.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, that's fine. Yep, there you go. So choose that and then say, okay. Uncheck that and just say, oh, wait a minute. No, you don't want to, no, you don't want to do that. Press escape. All right, now you're in, oh, see up there, it says extract. It looks like you did not did you not extract these?
Where would I go to extract?
See up the top at the
Oh,
bottom,
extract.
right there,
Okay.
yeah. So you
I
choose,
just took those files and copied them and saved them into a different folder because from there, they're extracted. They're just in a zipped folder.
So
yeah,
I can
well,
just drag it to,
well, I mean, you might as well take all of the files because you're going to use all those files anyway.
I can't even save it to my computer.
Well, I tell you what, I take, here, let me do this. I'm going to request remote control.
Yeah.
All right, now you see right here, that tells me I'm in that zipped folder. That little icon right here next to this data sets.
Okay.
So what I want to do is I'm going to go up one. And there's the data sets. Now that's what I want to extract. Okay. And I'm going to put that in. I'm going to extract all.
It probably took you to a different screen.
Did it?
Yeah, hold on, I'll drag it over.
All right.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. So now where I want to put this is going to be in, let's go ahead and put it in Carlson projects. And while I'm in Carlson projects, I'm going to make a new folder called MSoft Fundamentals class. Okay. So now I'll double click that and, or let me go back here and select that folder. And then I'll extract it. Okay. So now let's get everything set up here. So we are, go ahead and cancel all this. So right now you have a class example one drawing. I'm going to actually change where that's going to be saved. I'm going to save as, and I'm doing that so that I can set this as my working folder. So I'm going to go to Carlson Projects, MSoft, and I'll leave that same name and I'll say save. Okay, so now I go to my settings, set my project data folders. You should see drawing files, startup. Let's see, do I want to do it from here or not? Choose that.
No, hold on, it's on another screen.
All right.
There you go.
All right. Let's see. Browse. I don't want a new location. I think we'll be all right. So I've saved it in that location. And so now when I go to points, set my coordinate file. If I pull this down and choose this, and I'm going to now use that currently selected folder as my data folder. So now by default, that'll come up there. And there's now exercise 1 coordinates. And I'll open that. Okay, now when you go to points, list points, all. And you got 22 points. Okay. And I'll exit that. Okie doke. Now I'm going to stop remote control and I will stop your share. Put this back and I'll go back to sharing. Okay, everybody back? You see my screen now?
Got it. I'm with you.
Okay. Now, who did that, Jim or John? Who shared?
That was me, it's Jim.
All right, so you got your coordinate set. John, did you get yours set now?
Yes, I was able to do mine based off of what you did.
Okay, great. Everybody else good? Cyrus, Jacob?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So now that you have those points associated with this drawing, but they're still not in the drawing. But we're going to go to our points menu and we're going to use a command here called draw locate points. And when you choose that, it's going to bring up this dialog box. And I'm going to see that little symbol. That's the symbol that is set by default. You can also see right up here the coordinate file. That's another place you can set the coordinate file instead of the command we just used. It does the same thing. But let's do the symbol name. I'm going to choose the set button and I'm going to look at these points. I've got all of these different points like, sorry. Here's some down here in this NCS, that's National CAD Standards, all of those different types. But I'm just going to go up here to points and I'm going to choose this little X, standard X. Okay, now those, you may or may not have those same folders that you saw here with this pull down, but you'll have at least points, inlets and manholes, maybe points and wipeouts. I'm not sure what gets installed nowadays. Some of those I've added to this. But in any case, you can choose, I'm going to choose this little X as my standard. I'm going to not check anything up here. And I'm going to see how you can limit where they go. Like if you only wanted the points that are within a certain rectangle or a circle, you could choose that. But I'm going to say any points. I will turn on my descriptions, my elevations, and I'm going to locate on the real Z axis. That's going to put them at their elevation. So if you just match all that kind of stuff up, I'm going to use point numbers with automatic point numbering. Starting point number right now is 23. So if I were creating new ones, it would start where the last one left off. I can allow it to erase and redraw any duplicates or allow duplicates to draw only new. Here's my symbol size scalar. That's my 1/10 of an inch. My text size scalar is 0.08. I'm going to uncheck this overlapping attributes because that takes a little time to process. And layer name, you see, you can give it a particular name. You can just type a name. Even if it doesn't exist, it will create it. You can choose select and pick from a list of available names. Like I can scroll down here and find V. node. That's typically where points go, or you can just leave it on PNTS. You can draw a particular range of points. You can pick on the screen and it starts creating new points, or you can enter and assign where you type coordinate values. But I'm just going to choose draw all. And when I do that, hit that button, it's drawing points and it says points drawn 22, but you don't see them anywhere because on my screen until I do a zoom extents, I think, where the heck? Is that layer turned off maybe? Go back to, no, it's on.
My points did pull up because, or I'm assuming because I kept it on the PNTS.
Oh, I know exactly why mine are. I'm going to go back here and change this. Drawing setup, I'm at 20 scale. I'm using annotated text is the problem here. There they are. All right, so we've got these points and I'm going to change the color of that layer so you can see them a little better. And that is the PNT description, elevation, and number. That's those attributes. So I'm going to change that from blue to cyan so you can see them a little better. There they are. And there's my point number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Okay. Now, what this thing is, if I select everything, you look up here in my properties, it says I've got a group of 3 items. There are 2 blocks and a single point. So the 2 blocks are that red X, which is a graphic block, and this block, which is the 2 and the 1035. And if there was a description, for instance, if I double click that point, and I'm going to type down here as a description, point on ground, and I will put it not only in the drawing, but also in the coordinate file. So now you can see the description is there. Now, you see that O that looks like a square and all this little ugly text? That's because of the font that attribute style uses, and it's a particularly named text style. So if I go to either I can type style or choose draw text, set text or set style. You can do it that way, or the shortcut way is this layer control and scroll down here and find text styles, and it's that PTXT, that point text. And instead of that, I'm going to change mine to be this Calibri light. And now you can see it's much nicer. Okay. So now you got a bunch of points. So what can you do with the points? Let's go to the draw menu. and let's draw a 2D polyline. And let's uncheck this use current drawing properties. And let's select a layer, and we're going to put these on. Oh, okay, we'll just do it this way. I'm going to type down here layer name 2D dash P line, 2D polylines, 2D P lines. I'll say okay. And I'll say okay. And now look at the prompt down below. It says continue, so you could continue on an existing line, but we don't have anything in there yet. It says pick a point or point number. So I could just pick a point like this, and then it still says pick a point or point number. So if I type 1-5 and hit enter, it goes from where I left off to point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then let's go to 15-10. So see, it went from 5 over here to 15 to 14 to 13 to 12 to 11 to 10. And you can keep picking points like so and go up into using point numbers again. So point number 9, I just hit 9. Let's come down here to 8. And let's come over here all the way up to 22. Okay, now I'm going to choose my 2D polylines. I'm going to make them yellow and a little bigger so you can see it. All right, so there's a way of doing those based on point numbers. So notice I mixed up a variety of ways, clicked stuff in on the screen and moved around, and wherever I picked is where it put the elevations. Now, if you hold the shift key down and press and hold the wheel in on the mouse and push it up, see what happens? That line is down at 0 elevation because I said draw a 2D polyline. I'm going to go back and hit this top. So I'm back in plan view. It looks like it went right through those points, and it did, but only at the elevation of 0. So let's do this again. I'm going to pre-make a new layer. I'm going to choose my layer view. I'm going to make a new layer. And it didn't match the filter, so come down here and find new. Say new. Hit new layer. I'm going to call that one 3D P lines. And I'm going to make it this magenta color. And I'll make it 0.5. It's fine. All right, so now I'm going to go to my draw menu and draw a 3D polyline. And right now where it says prompt for elevation or slope, if that's checked, even when you encounter an elevation, like with a point number, it's going to ask you to confirm it. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to uncheck that so it doesn't. Notice I've also got, if I confirm it, it's going to set it 4 feet lower than that because of this elevation adder. So that was done the last time I used the command. I was setting water lines to be 4 feet deep. So I'll leave that. I'll just uncheck this so it's going to go without prompting. And
Hey,
now on the layer,
mine's not letting me create a new layer. Could you walk me through that again?
yeah, you can do it right here if you want to just type the layer name. But what I did was I went to the layer control and I chose this new layer. Now, if you're sitting on this all used layers, it won't show up. It'll tell you that it's not there. So you have to go back to all, and then you have to look up here in this little filter where it's got that asterisk. Go to the left of the asterisk and just type new, and you'll see it show up as new layer 1. Now I've already,
Okay.
did you get it?
Yeah, I got it. I'm just gotta change all the settings in it, so I should be good.
And you can rename that if you want to, if you hadn't already. Just click and click again in the name. You can rename it or select it, right click and choose rename, do whatever you like with it. Okay. All right, so now let's draw a 3D polyline. Uncheck the prompting and come down here where the layer is. I'm going to select, and now up here where the filter is, I'm going to just type 3D and it'll sort that. There's my 3D P lines. I'll say okay. I'll say okay. And again, if I do click, 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 they are at 0 elevation right now. And you can see that on the status line above the command prompt. But I'm going to type 1-5 and then 10. No, it was 15-10. And then I went click, click, click. And let's just go to 9, 8, 22. So 9, enter, 8, enter, 22, enter. Now it's still asking me for more. When I'm finished, I just hit enter one more time to conclude the command. And so now what you see is it looks like I'm overlapping my yellow line, my original yellow line, which is here, with my magenta line, which is the 3D line here. And it looks like in plan view that I'm directly over top of it. But if you hold shift, hold the wheel and press it, now look at the difference. So where I clicked in space, it went 0, 0, 0. And then when I used point numbers, it went up there and grabbed the points elevations. And it's going through every one of those points, which have different elevations as it drew that around. Okay, so that's a very important concept. And that's one reason why I always like to in my points, when I draw locate points, I'll show that command again. That's why I always like to have this locate on the real Z axis so that I know where those points are in space. They're always at their right elevation. You wouldn't have you wouldn't have had to. You could have drawn the points down at 0, even though they have elevation. And when you draw this 3D polyline and use the point numbers, it puts the polyline up at that elevation. But to me, I like to see it because I can visually verify that. And so that can be done, as you draw locate points. You can also go to the points menu and choose your point defaults, the very first one. And this is where you can set things like locate on real Z axis. So you're turning that on by default. Okay. You can set the symbol. I'll use, say, this time a plus mark, and I'm going to choose this this layout over here. It's what we call the layout ID, the attribute layout ID, and the icon's right here. This is a preview of it. And you can see, you can do them metallics. You can do it where the elevation is kicked up at an angle. You can do it in different orders so that the elevation is below and the description's to the right. The one I like is here where they're all lined up on the right. And this is just a little preview. So if I say that's okay, and I'll say okay. And now I'm going to go back to plan view. If I add down here, I've got a straight point. So I'm going to just erase that. All right, so now I'm going to go back to points, draw locate points again. And this time where it says duplicates, I'm going to erase the ones that are here and redraw them. I'm just going to say draw all. And you're going to watch how they change. You see how they line up? And where was my point number 2 was right here. See how they all lined up on the left, justified there? That's just a different attribute ID. Now, watch what happens here. If I go to the points menu and choose right down here in the middle section under adjust coordinates, I'm going to move the point. And it wants me to select a point. So I'm going to select this point number 13. And I'm going to move it up here. I think I'm going to have to turn off my attribute. Now, when I moved that point, it changed its location, but this did not go anywhere with it, right? Because I redrew the points. However, if I do this, I'm going to just do a crossing, select those 2 polylines and delete them. And now where the points are, I'm going to draw draw a 3D polyline. And I'm going to say, okay, and I'm just going to say 1-22. Just to make it easy. So now there was that point 13. Now if I go back to points, adjust coordinates and move the point, watch what happens now. If I select 13 and move it down here, see how that line followed it? Well, that's really annoying. Let me see if I can turn that off. Their point defaults. Actually, that should I can go ahead and keep that, but keep the points off. Now let's try this again. If I select that and delete it, I'm going to draw my 3D polyline again. 1-22, enter, enter. And now if I move this point, now the last time I moved it, I went to the menu, but if I just select it and grab that grip in the middle, move it up here, it asks me, do you want to update the coordinates? And I'm going to say yes to all. So it moved and the line went with it. Okay. If I select, let's select 3 points. And let's just use a CAD move command. So edit, move. I'm going to go from here up to here. It's going to ask me if I want to prompt. Yep. And the line goes with it. Now, yours may or may not be doing that. And where that happens is right here. And then if you go to settings, to the settings menu and go to Carlson configure, you'll get this box up, and this is where there's a lot of settings that control all kinds of things about your drawing. So let's look at the general settings, and where that behavior is set is right over here in this right-hand block that says object linking, where I said to link line work with points. And what that means is anytime, any lines that you draw where you've gone through a point, if that point moves, the line will go with it. Okay? So if I uncheck it and turn it off, and I'll say okay, say exit, I'm going to grab these 3 points and move them again. I'll just come right click and choose move. And I'll go from here down to here. And yes, I want to update the coordinates. Notice it's still moved. And that is because that switch was on when the switch was on at the time this line was drawn. So if I delete the line and redraw it, I'm going to go right click, recent commands, C 3DP. That's to draw a 3D polyline. I'll say okay. I'm going to say 1 to 22 again. Hit enter. I'm going to grab those 3 points again. Right click, recent command, move. I'm going to go from here to here. Yes to all, but notice that did not follow because under my settings, Carlson configure, general, it was not checked on. Now, I like to have them all on, but there's reasons why some people would not necessarily like to have them all on. And I'll give you an example. You can see what some of these are. Is the link to points with the coordinate file. That was that prompt that came up and asked if I wanted to update the points in the coordinate file because I was moving it on the screen. So if I uncheck that, although it always is going to prompt me, but if I said no, leave the coordinate file alone, here's what happens. And when I was teaching this class down in Charlotte, North Carolina, a number of years ago, probably 15 or 16 years ago, I was at a big surveying company down there, and they set us up in a training class room. And there were 12 or 15 students in the class, including their supervisor. And so once I showed him that, and also the fact that here's another thing that happens, is these settings, when you set these up here and you turn these on or off, I'm going to turn that back on. When you turn those on and off, that only affects my computer, my version of Carlson. Somebody else opens up this file and works on it. Whatever they have set for them is going to take effect from that point forward in the file. And then if I get it back, my settings take effect as well. That's why you have these load and save as buttons, so you can set these up if everybody in the company needs to use the same settings, do a save as and load them up on everybody's machine. Okay. So I explained that to showed this linking to the class, and the supervisor says, all right, I want all you guys to get up right now, go back to your office, check your personal machines, and come back and tell me what that is set to on your machine. So some people came back Some people had it on, some people had it off. Now, here's what happened. Some of the surveyors in the group, when they get something like, this down in here, maybe they're analyzing a property boundary, and they got a bunch of found points, and they might all be right on top of each other. And so they were always used to drawing the points, and then if they needed to get closer, they would just grab the point and just drag it out of the way, because they knew they could just redraw the points and it would come back from the coordinate file, in its original position if they didn't have that on. And then they would draw the property boundary, say through, point 17 to 15 or whatever. Well, if that person is used to using it, but then I get the file and I'm having to work on stuff and my settings were done. So I would draw the boundary, say 17 to 15, but I had the linking turned on. And it goes back to this other guy who has his linking off. Now, of course, they weren't aware of the linking switch at all. They didn't know anything about it, but his was set off. And so he's moving the point around thinking that it's not going to affect anything. Well, it's updating the coordinate file and it's updating the lines. And so these points are just real close together. And it wound up, so the supervisor saw what people came back and told him, and he said, well, that explains the last lawsuit we had, because they had screwed up somebody's boundary because somebody moved the point and the line went with it. And, it was not where it was supposed to be. And they got sued over it. So that's something to keep in mind, is to know what those switches do. Now, here's another quick switch that I'll show you that's really helpful. Let's go to the draw menu and choose draw 2D polyline. And let's say, okay, and I just want you to go click, 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 enter. Just like a little Z shape looking thing. Now this is going to be an alignment. I'm going to turn this into a center line. So all it is right now is a polyline. See, I select it, I look up there, it's a polyline, and that's all it's ever going to be. But if I double click it, notice down here on the command line, it puts me in the p-edit command, or the edit polyline command. Okay. Now, watch this. If you go to the centerline menu and you choose polyline to centerline file. So I've got a drawn polyline and I want to turn that into a centerline. So I'm going to choose that. And it wants me to give it a centerline file to write. So it's going to save it as a file. I'm in my proper folder. I'm just going to click in the field and type test, and it's save. Reading the prompts down here on the command line now, it says, select the polyline that represents the center line, and it tells you above that it should have been drawn in the direction of increasing stations. You have a chance to reverse it if you choose. If I select it, it shows me the direction it was drawn. You've got the option down here to reverse. You can click that or type R if you need to, but I'm good to go with that. Beginning station of 0, that's good to go. So I'm just going to hit enter. And then it tells me, some stuff here, as to where it found everything, and then press enter to continue. So I'll hit enter. So now I have a centerline file. It's still, when I select it, it's still just a polyline, but if you double click it, look what happens. It's no longer the p-edit command. It's this Carlson centerline editor. And if you go to each of these segments, you're going to see it show up in your field here. So I'm going to sit on this first one, and I'm going to say fit curve. And I'm just going to type a radius of, say, 75 feet. And I'll hit OK. So it would put a 75-foot radius up in here. I'm going to go down to the next one and I'm going to say fit curve, and I'm going to make that one a 25-foot curve. And OK, and now it's going, that would be what my alignment's going to look like now. Now watch, when I save, so I've saved the changes. Now when I hit exit, watch the screen. That was because settings, Carlson configure, general, I had link line work with center lines turned on. Now that's a two-way link. So if you make changes to the editor, you will see it update in the file. Now watch what happens if I just do a simple grip edit. Let's make it much smaller. So when I grip edited that, it enforced the tangencies because it knows it's a centerline file. And now when you double click the file or double click the polyline, it loads up the editor, and notice it made that curve 21.658 foot radius. Okay, so you can edit it on the screen, it updates the file. You can update the file, edit the file, it will update the screen if that linking is turned on. Okay, so get to know some of those settings and what they do. There's also a link labels with line work. Now labels are a special type of text, although when it draws them, it's only drawing the it's only creating text, but it's done so based on it being annotation. So we're going to label these things. I'm going to go into my centerline menu, and I'm going to choose to station polyline or centerline. And I'm going to choose down here in the middle a centerline file. I'm going to load up some settings that I had saved. You don't need to worry about. I don't know if that's going to be correct or not. I'm going to use my test centerline. Yep, there they are. So it's got station 0 + 0 0, 1 + 0 0, PC station and radius, the PT station, etc. Okay. If I double click my center line now, and let's go back to that curve. I'm going to double click it, and I'm going to make that a 50-foot radius this time. Hit OK. Save. Exit. Did you see what happened? It not only redrew it, it redrew the labels or the annotation. But again, if I select this item and look over my properties, it's nothing in the world more than text. And I am completely free to move it around, reposition it. I can even edit it. Instead of saying PC 0 plus, I can say PC station equals. I can reposition it back wherever I might want it. So anything would be fine. Now, double click this again, double click my curve. Let's make that say a 35-footer. Save, exit. Now, did you see what happened? It re-annotated and it used the settings that I had in place the first time I did it. So that edit that I made was lost because it recreated it. Okay. But now that works for that. That works for like if you've got a, let's just do a bound, let's draw a rectangle. And let's go to annotate, and we're going to auto annotate. And we'll just say, okay, I'm going to select this. And, oh, come on. All right, so there's now is its dimensions around. If I select this and grab a corner and go up here, all the annotation goes with it. It recomputes. And that would be the same as if I had done yep, I may have locked things up. If I had, there it is, fine. If I had done the area of that, so annotating, let's see, area layout, area by closed polyline. Let's just grab this guy right here. I think it's wrong command. What's going on? Ah, there we go. All right, so that's lot number one. There's my square feet, my acreage. If I select this, see how everything updates and changes? That's all because of that switch. As soon as this thing gives the ghost. Press escape. And again, settings, Carlson configure general settings. That's that linking right over here. Link labels with line work. Okay. Now it does not work like if I were to go up here and change this 9552, if I wanted to call that 100. See, I've done that, but that did not make this change to be 100 feet. So it's only if I change this, well, what will happen with this? I get some kind of lag going on here. Good thing it's lunchtime. I'll reset everything. There we go. All right, so now I'm not, yeah, okay. So when I reset it back to a line, it recomputes and redisplays. So that was all done by that linking. Switch over here, okay? So a lot of things here that, you can explore on your own, but that's how that stuff works. That's how using these points are going to be very helpful for us in either 2D or 3D. And there's all kinds of other things. You could have a series of points. Let's say you go out in the field and you're surveying and you get a bunch of points that you surveyed a bunch of centerline shots along a roadway. You can go to that center line and do a, best fit. Let me see if it's, yeah, under coordinate geometry, best fit. You can best fit center line, curves, circles, points. So you could select all the points that you think were surveyed in the field to be along the center line of the road, and you do a best fit, and it will do a geometric alignment with tangent curves in it based on a least squares adjustment through the position of those points. And for center lines, that needs to be 2D. The center lines, alignments need to be 2D so that those arcs stay true arcs. Although you can have a 3D center line, but when it goes around the arcs, it has to be chorded in those little straight line segments, but that's another story. So, but there's all kinds of ways that you can do it and all kinds of things that points are going to help us with, okay? Now, if you look back at this exercise, it's basically drawing through that, and then we'll come back and look at point groups after lunch. Okay, so we're coming up to 45 minutes here, overrun for lunch. So we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. It's now a quarter to 1 o'clock my time. It's a quarter till this hour. So go ahead and get your full hour for lunch. So let's come back at a quarter till 2 o'clock Eastern, and we'll go from there. Now, does anybody have any particular questions that may have occurred to you during this last little gush? Everybody good?
Yes, sir. See you after lunch.
Okie doke. I will pause our recording. I'll keep things running but I'll stop the share.
I actually have one question real quick.
Okay.
How did you get the acreage again? I got it annotated, but I didn't know how to get the acreage in the middle.
It was in my area layout, my area defaults. And that's where we set all this stuff up. And in my area defaults, I brought all of these different available.
Okay.
Yeah, I brought these, like I could take that back out. And then once I'm here, my square feet, if I double click that, I said, I want to make my square feet to the nearest single square foot. Okay. And now for my acres, I want to make that to the nearest 4 decimal places, or the nearest 10,000th of an acre. And I'm going to place that plus or minus symbol as the suffix on the acreage. Okay, now, bonus points for any of you math types. Why did I put my square footage to the nearest single square foot, but my acreage to the nearest 10,000th? And I'll give you the answer. This has to do with significant figures, because there are 43,560 square feet in an acre. So that's on an order of magnitude of 10,000s, or 1/10,000th for the acreage. So a change in the square footage of a single square foot will trigger a change in the single digit to the 4th decimal place out here. Likewise, a change in that, the backward conversion would change this. But if I had like 3 decimal places out here, those 3 decimal places won't affect this digit until it affects this one. So if it's big enough to roll this up to a 7, that would roll up to the next, whatever the conversion is. Okay. Now you'll see a lot of people, a lot of surveyors even, they'll put down the square footage down to the nearest 10th of a square foot, and they'll only put acreage out to 3 decimal places. And that's technically not correct. It should be done like that. But anyway, we'll leave that for another day.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? Everybody good?
Ken, if you could stick around for a second, the other guys take off for lunch. I want to share my screen with you because you lost
Yeah.
me at 3D polylines and I'm just kind of pissed off now.
All right. Let me stop my share. Go ahead and share when ready.
All right.
Every time.
Every time I looked over at yours, it's bouncing between different layers here, and mine I can't get to move between new layer one. So you were on 3D polyline layer at one point. I don't even have that. Is that something you created?
Yes, I created the layer. So let me show you where this happened. Right click and I'll let you.
Hold on, there you go.
Okay, so now there's a number of things like when you select this, that is on 2D polyline.
Yeah.
Okay. When I select this, it's on new layer one. This is on 2D polyline. Okay,
But then
so
I could never get 3D polyline. That's where I was starting to get frustrated, and I just said, forget it. I'm not going to hold everyone else up.
oh, I see. Okay, so what happens? Like, see, there's no 3D. So when you draw, you have to draw it as a 3D polyline, and you go
So
to
I tried to. I hit 3D polyline, and then I'd click a point and try and get it to draw, and I couldn't.
right here. See this prompt for elevation slope?
Yeah.
If you have that on, and let's uncheck use the current drawing properties, and let's select, did you have a 3D? Yeah, you've only got the 2D. That's all right. We'll go down here and just say 3D dash P lines. And that'll create it for us. And we can change I'm gonna set my color. I'll leave it as by layer. All right, and my line type, I'm gonna also set to by layer. All right, so now I'm just gonna go 1 to 22.
So you just typed in 1 to 22.
Yeah, because it said pick point or point numbers. And that's why we like to use Kogo points, because it knows those numbers. I can also say, draw a 2D polyline. And let's just change that so we can see the difference. Now, if I just do click, 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 and now I'm going to start there at 13. I'm going to go to 6. I'll say 13-6. So it's going to walk its way around, and I can do click, 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 hit enter to finish. And so now that's 2D, and notice my 3D is up here. Now, why mine worked and yours did not was I'm going to select this guy and delete it. And I'll get rid of this one too. So this time, let's go back to 3D to draw 3D polyline. And prompt for elevation or slope. And if I do click, click, click. Now, if I say 13, oh, see, it's also adding 15 feet. Oh, you see. 13. So that read 151.11, and it's adding this. So I'm going to go here and say 12 to 9 or 12 to 8. All right, so let's see what we've got here now. So the zeros stayed at 0, but once I hit, I think they're 0. Let me see what that is. I'm going to hover in the grip. I'm going to look down here at the bottom on the status bar, and I see that's at negative 1327. That's at negative 779. And that's at 15. And that's now at 151 because it's reading those numbers. So when we created it this time, we clicked a point. Let's just try it one more time. Whoops, sorry. If I make that 0, so we're not adding anything to it. And you are prompting for a slope. So if I click here, see now it's 0. We'll say 12. Now, when I typed 12 in there, see what happened? It wasn't the point number 12. It's using that as the elevation because it was prompting me. So what it should have been, pay attention to that prompt. So if I click here, it's 0, Z elevation, and it says, look at the prompt, it says next point or elevation, interpolate. So it's set to interpolate. So it's going to interpolate all the way up to point number 12. And see, it says this point elevation will be interpolated upon completion. So if you just type 12 in there, it's going to set the elevation to 12. So I'm going to say next point. So I clicked on next point, and now I can say 12. Oh, no, it still did not do that right. Yeah,
So it's not just me.
no, no. But all right, so now all right, so I'm here. What do I want to do? I'm still interpolating. So if I snap to point 12, but let me see. Still set to 0. Oh, I know what. I'm going to type E for elevation. Now 12, I think. No, that finished the interpolation, and now pick a point or point number. So 12 to 9. So now this guy, yeah, see, it went from 0. Well, it interpolated backwards from that 12 up to where the point number was. So what you have to be careful of and aware of is when you are using the 3D draw command, if you uncheck that, it's going to read the elevation of anything you snap to or a point number. And if you click an empty space, it leaves it at 0 because that's what you're clicking. If you do say prompt, however, when you do that, it will interpolate between. So if I start at, say, 15, pick a point number, so 15, and I want to go to point number 12, but I want to get there by a series of points. So I'm going to say interpolate, and so it will be interpolated when I finish. So I'm going to keep clicking, 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 and now at this point, do I just type? See, this should come back. I should be able to do this. Let's see, I don't want having to. I can't get out of the interpolation until I give it a closing elevation. I don't want to have to type it.
So when did you click on 13 and it knew to end it there?
Yeah, it read that elevation. See, here's part of the problem is 12 doesn't have an elevation, I don't think. Yeah, it did. Why isn't it showing?
I think I just need to, once you post it on YouTube, I just need to go back and go through it slower. Because you're going through and I'm trying to click to keep up, but by the time I get to where I think you're another 6 steps ahead of me and I get lost.
Yeah, well, catch me ahead of time too, so we can do that. But
Well,
that
the problem is I'll be catching you a lot and then I'm holding everybody up.
well, but don't feel that way. This is not. All right, so that's at 155.75, 53.39, 52. See that?
Yeah.
Went ahead and then 149.11. Yeah, so it. But see, I snapped to that. Now, let me. I'm going to stop that and. Go back to share. It's a different behavior from what it used to be anyway. So if I prompt, leave that alone. Say okay, and if I go click, click, the point will be interpolated upon completion. See if I type. I type 22. Yeah, see that doesn't work. Let's see if I can do that. Click, still interpolated. And 62, 92, 64. Accept that. And then do 21 through 15. Yeah, see 168. So that interpolated backwards from that right there. So the very first point was being, the very first point does not stay at 0. It interpolates from the first given elevation that you give it. So you could either type that closing elevation if you know it and then start picking up again, or you'd have to snap to the geometry to read the elevation and then continue on. Now, because of that, see, that one worked, but because I did not, yeah, I guess it did. It took it, okay. Because I snapped to the point, and that's another, this point object snapping that I had on. So it read it and honored the point. So you'd have to snap to the point to read the elevation, and then you can continue with the numbers. It didn't used to work that way. It used to be you could click, 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 and then you could jump to that point number. I'll have to
Okay.
research that a little bit. Anyway, go get yourself some lunch and think of any of those, and we'll go from there. All right.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ken.
All right. See you back at 1/4 till.
Yep.
Okay, there we go. Now we're back to recording again. I'm so sorry. I tend to forget that. So, so we're using the point group manager to be able to take our points and based on those descriptions, make some groups out of them that we can use as a shorthand instead of typing a bunch of point numbers. But if you read the description over here, see, there are 144 different points with these different descriptions. And if you wanted to put little circles around the property corners, you could use draw locate points and find all the points that match the descriptions and type those point number ranges in, or, you know, draw and then erase the ones you don't want, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to make a shorthand way of doing that. So go to the points menu, choose point group manager. Let's go to groups. You see there's some commands under these little menus that are in here. These are the same commands or some of the same commands that you have down here on these buttons as well. So I'm going to just choose the create group. I'm going to make a group up here. I'm going to give it a name and I'm going to call it property corners. I'm not going to bother with the description here. And I'm going to uncheck, excuse me, uncheck include all. And I will come down here and check description. And I can set a description. I can either just type it or I can set from a list. And I know I see I've got a point called BDY. And there's points called P core. So I'm going to, I've selected that one for boundary. I've also got some points here called P core for property corner. So I'm going to hold down the control key and click that. So now I've got two things selected and I'm going to choose OK. And now there's my description separated by commas. And I would say make, or now that I've got the description set, I'm going to say save. Excuse me. And now in this group called property corners, I've got boundary, 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 and P-core. So all of the boundary points, all the property corners. Let's make a couple more. Let's choose create. And let's make a group called house corners. Well, let's just say houses. I'm going to uncheck include all. I'll choose description. I'll set from my list. And I've got this building. I'll say okay. And save. Now I've got two. I've got houses and property corners. Now I could make another group called exterior boundary, for instance. I'll uncheck this, check description. And notice you can exclude, include, choose from a list, choose from the drawing, all kinds of different things. You can limit it to elevation ranges. Excuse me. So my description, I'm going to make these the exterior, so it's just the BDY points. And now notice you can also use wildcards like BDY star. And if you see that now, exterior boundary has BDY, BDY rat point. So anything that starts with a BDY, excuse me, and ends with anything is included. But I'm going to edit that and take that asterisk back up because I don't want the radius points. I'm just going to say boundary points. Okay. So now I say, okay, I've got three different, excuse me, three different point groups. Now we go to, I am so sorry, I'm losing my voice here. If I go to points and draw locate points, I'm going to set my circle to be this points with wipeout, circle to have a little wipeout to block. And I'll leave everything else checked on like we see it here. And I'm going to say, instead of draw all, I'm going to say draw point group. And so when I choose that, I'm going to get my exterior boundary. I'm going to say, okay. And now you can see I've got a point there. Let me set this up a little better. There you go. So, excuse me, I've got these points along the exterior that are setting that external boundary around my property line. Okay. So now let's do that again with another slight little twist. Let's go to the points menu and choose erase points. Now it says to select the points from the screen or a group or by point number. So let's just take the ones on the screen. So I'm going to choose screen. Says select entities. I'm just going to grab everything on the screen with a crossing window, or you can type all. Hit enter to finish the selection set. And now continue to read the prompt line. It says delete the points from the coordinate file. No, we want to keep them in the coordinate file. Now, do you want to delete the symbols, the attributes, or both? We'll delete them both. And now we're back with no points in the drawing. However, we still have our listed points of 144 points. Okay. So now, instead of plotting those points, drawing the points, and then freezing off the layers that the attributes are on, if you go to points, draw locate points, this time uncheck descriptions, elevations, and point numbers, and choose draw point group. Choose that exterior boundary. And now you've got a point sitting there, and you see that little octagonal frame, that's a wipeout, which hides, you see that goes all the way to the corner, but it hides the drawing underneath it. What a wipeout does. I'm going to turn those frames off. So I'm going to type wipeout F to get wipeout frame, and I'm going to set it to 0. And then I'm going to type REA to regen all. So it's going to regenerate the drawing. So now we've got nice little circles sitting at all of those exterior boundary points. And I could have actually put them on the exterior boundary layer, perhaps.
I must have something different in settings because it did not, it just drew the odd shape instead of the circle and didn't delete the drawing underneath it.
Okay, so what you have going on right now is a circle resolution issue that's it's a AutoCAD thing. If you type the word VIEWRES, that's view resolution, and hit enter. It says, do you want fast zooms? Go ahead and choose enter for yes. Notice the angle brackets. If you just hit enter, that's what you're going to get. And now it wants a curve display quality anywhere from 1 to 20,000, and yours is probably set to 100. So type 20,000 and hit enter. And then that should change that from looking like the stop signs to looking like a true circle. So you actually drew the circle, the circle itself, okay? But it was showing you lopsided because it was a display list issue. Did that fix it for you?
Mine did not wipe out the octagon. I still got the octagon and the circle.
Did you do the view res and set it to 20,000?
I did, yes.
All right, type REA to do a regen all. And it should look like a circle instead of an octagon.
I've still got the circle and the octagon.
And the octagon.
Yes.
And you're seeing the line all the way through it?
No, no line all the way through.
So it's clipping the line at the edge, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's working correctly. Now, you're still seeing the frame, because if you type wipe out F for wipeout frame and hit enter, and now set that value to 0 instead of 1, and then do another REA after that.
Okay, now I've just got the circle.
Okay, so that's now, if any of you have just the circles and not, it's not hiding the corner.
That's where I'm at.
Okay, so here's what you need to do for that. Go back to draw locate points. And this time for the circle as your symbol, choose the set button up here. And you need to change it from
Draw locate
set,
point.
which was the points. You need to pull that points list down and choose points plus wipeout and choose SPT 4_W.
Got it.
Okay. And then that should fix it for you. Take care of it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good deals. So now, so that's a way of doing this. Now, like I said, you could have drawn a point, click, snap to the endpoint and all that, but the problem is, you see this little endpoint right there? That's the end of this arc and the start of that line. You know, you may not notice it, or you might get into a place where there's a, you know, another corner somewhere here and you can't really find, you know, where those endpoints are necessarily. These look fairly straightforward, so it would work. But so that's why when you have these points that are set there and you use that point group, you're not having to try to snap, 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 you know, pick all of the corners, which you could do, but that you see how much quicker it lets you establish those corners, those points. Now, let's do another go around. We're going to go back to the points menu and choose draw locate points. We'll leave everything just like we've had it, making sure down here in the bottom where it says duplicates that you erase and redraw. And let's change the layer name down here to, we'll just call it prop core for property corner. And then we'll choose draw point group. And this time, instead of the exterior boundary, let's choose the property corners, because you remember it has those exterior points as well as the interior property corner points. And we'll say, okay. And so now you see you've got points here on the corner of the exterior, as well as points here on these interior corners. Okay. Now, notice there's one missing right here. And the reason is because it did not have a point associated with that corner. So if I double click that particular point, I see that it is a P core points, point number 106. But when the point list was made, it simply did not put one on that corner. So, excuse me, so how would you fix that? Any takers?
I would love to answer that, but I'm having a hard time with my points right now. I have all points on all entities drawn.
Oh, that's okay. Just let's do this. Go back to the points menu and choose erase points and choose screen. And it says select objects. Just type the word all, hit enter. Hit enter to finish the selection set, and then answer no to delete from the coordinate file. And the symbols attributes of both, choose both. And that
Yep.
should clear out all your points, right?
Yes, it did.
Okay, now let's do it again. Let's go first of all to the point group manager. Let's make sure you've got the right points in your property corners group.
I definitely do have that.
Okay, so I'm going to close that off. Now I'm going to go to points, draw locate points, and I'm going to make sure that I uncheck the elevations, descriptions, and point numbers.
All the same there.
Okay, and I've got my layer name set to prop core. And then I'm going to draw point group, not draw all, but draw point group. And when this comes up, I'm going to choose property corners. And then say OK. And that should now put them where they belong.
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay, now, so how do we get a point out here? You know, we missed that point. We need to set that property corner point. Well, let's do something. Let's clear out some of our drawing. We're going to look at another one of our Carlson commands, and it's on the view menu. Now, a lot of these things that I'm going to get from the view menu, I've got up here in this toolbar called layers, where I can control some of the visibility. So you might come to find that that is a handier way to do it. You might also be using the ribbon. I don't tend to use a ribbon. It just takes up too much of my screen. So I'm going to go to view menu and I'm going to say isolate layers. It's right here about midway down in the bottom section. And when I do that, it says select the objects on the layers to isolate. So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to select one of the points, one of the exterior boundary. Oops, let me see. I didn't want that particular one. Let's just get, let's pick part of the exterior boundary. Let's see, now let's add back. So I'll pick one of the points, the exterior boundary, and I'm going to pick one of those property lines. And so I'm going to isolate just those 3 layers. I'm going to hit enter to finish my selection set. And now you see I've got everything drawn here all in the same layer. Now I've got this line, which is on a layer called perimeter, which is also the same layer as this one, perimeter. So I don't really, you know, that's the perimeter of my road grading is what that actually is. So you can even get that out of your way if you want by another view command called view show hide by selection, and we're going to hide by selection. I'm going to pick that one line that's the outline of my road. And so now it's hidden. The other layers are on. Okay, so I've isolated everything, and I'm just doing that so I can visually verify that I've got all the points that I need, except I look like I'm missing that one point. Okay. So yeah, that's it. I thought there was one missing there. So that
All
one,
of my points are gone. I don't have any of them right now.
all right, go back. Let's go back to, let's reset. Let's go back to view, show hide by selection, show all. And then let's go back to view and choose restore layers. Now, do you see your points back?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so what you did is you missed isolating that particular layer. So
So
let's
I
go
need to go
back to
back
that.
to view,
Yeah. And,
isolate layer,
yeah. And so
and then
now is select objects on layers to isolate. You just need to pick one example. So pick one of the points. Pick
one of the points or just the boundary line.
no, the point. Pick the actual circle
Okay.
because it's on a separate layer, right? And
Okay.
then pick the boundary line and then pick one of the white lot lines and then hit enter. And now you should see,
Yep. There's all my points.
okay, and you still have this guy in your way, right?
Which one? The pink one?
This,
Yes.
yeah. So to get that out of our way, if we were to not isolate that, it would have turned off the exterior boundary because they're on the same layer. So we're going to instead we're gonna have to show hide by selection. So we're gonna hide by selection. And this lets you pick individual objects to hide. So I'm gonna hide that one object I clicked on that road outline and I'll hit enter. And now it's out of my way,
Okay,
okay?
thank you.
So now, how do we get a point on this corner?
Can we just draw a point there?
Exactly right. You go to points, draw locate points. We'll keep the same thing that we had, but this time instead of drawing a group or anything, we're going to screen pick. And when it says pick a point to create, now I'm going to point to this line. You see that endpoint snap comes up, but you may or may not have your snaps on. So if you hold the shift key down and right click the mouse and then let the shift key up, and we're going to come up here and choose endpoint out of that list. And now when you hover over that line, you should see that endpoint show up. Do you?
Yes.
All right, click the mouse left button while that's showing up, and that will draw the point. Now, it's asking you point to create again and again and again. I'm going to hit enter to finish. And we have a point there. We've drawn it. It's there. But if I double click that circle, which is which is supposed to be editing the point. It's not, it's trying to edit the block. Select that and delete it. Let me try this one more time. Draw points, draw locate points. I think this time we have to use point numbers to get, yeah, we have to use a point number.
I must have selected the wrong thing because it deleted that whole front property line on mine.
You can do an undo. Go back to edit and choose undo.
He's jumping ahead of the game.
Okay.
Got it back?
Walk me through getting rid of that point again, because I did it.
Okay,
did
so
it
now
before,
you
I
got
can
the point again. Just click on the circle so that that's the only thing that's selected.
Okay.
And then hit the delete key.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, so now let's go back to points and draw locate points. We have to turn the point numbers on to get it to generate as a point. Otherwise, it just drew the symbol. So if we do that and then screen pick, and then we're going to make sure the end point is indicated there. And if it's not on, just hold the shift key and right click the mouse. All right, so we've hit the point and we hit enter to finish. And now if you double click that symbol, it knows it's a point, okay? It's point number 145. Now notice there's no description in the coordinate file. So I'm gonna click down here in this bottom field. And if you're seeing something else like these, click the general tab and then go to the coordinate file description and let's put in PCOR as the description. And we'll say, okay. Okay, so now PCOR is there, and that was point number 145, PCOR. Okay. Now let's go back to our point group manager and look for property corners. And then scroll down here and you see it automatically added it to the group because it had the right description. See how that worked? Everybody up to date, up to speed?
Definitely.
Okay.
I am curious as to how that property corner got set without there being a point there, though.
Well, what happened was when I took the original file that did not have any points in it, and I isolated these layers, and then I went to my Kogo menu and I said create points from entities. And I chose symbol, blah, 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 and elevations, and I gave it a description down here of PCOR. And then I said something like that and said, okay. And then entities to process, polylines, lines, arcs. So I just basically missed that corner, that particular polyline, because this is an arc and this is a poly. No, that's a line, not a polyline. Of course, that's a line too. In any case, well, and it could be that maybe I inadvertently erased the point. So the point was missing. And I thought, well, that'd be a good teachable moment anyway. So the points were created ahead of time and put in the coordinate file. The lines were drawn by some other means. Somebody just
I was
outlined.
curious as to if they drew it as at the point of intersect, and then that's where that point would inevitably end up being.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the points used to not exist until I created them and set them on these corners.
I see.
Okay, so, and I had that one missing so that we could talk about that as an issue. The line work was simply drawn, it drew a line from the end of this arc, from the end of this arc. They drew a line from there up to wherever it's supposed to go, and then they drew another arc over here. I don't know how they created those. Maybe they, set this a certain width apart, for whatever means I don't know because I didn't create those.
I understand.
All right. So now we've got all of our property corners are showing. And now we're going to come back into our view menu and restore layers. And that's going to put our layers back on. And notice our road outline is still turned off. Because remember, we hit it with a different command. We used view, show hide by selection. So this time we need to show all. Now, if you were to save and exit your drawing and come back into it, that will come back. But anyway, it's there. Now, here's something else that's also missing. And we're going to go back to, just to make it easier, let's go back to isolate layers again. And no, we might as well get the point. The exterior boundary in one of the lot lines. And we hit enter. And we'll go to view. Show hide by selection. Hide by selection. We'll get that guy out of the way. So we're back to where we were. Oh, one other thing. Oops, one thing I need to fix. I'm going to go back to restore layers. And now I'm going to isolate layers again. View, isolate layers. We'll get the point, that, and that, but also the lot numbers. That's what I meant to have turned on. There we go. So notice we have a lot 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, but the lot line is missing between 78 and 79. Now, if I look at this segment along that boundary, that is an arc. This is an arc. Okay, so what we need to do is to create a boundary line that goes, from the midway point along here to the midway point along here. And there's several ways we can do that. Assuming that, let's see, that this arc, let me see, this arc has a radius point way out here. So if I draw a line just temporarily, I'm going to draw a 2D polyline. I'll just say use current. And I'm going to draw from, and I'm going to use another snap. So I'm going to shift right click. I'm going to go from the center of that arc up to, say, the end point there. I'm going to do, finish that command. I'm going to repeat that command, hit OK. And I'm going to draw this time, shift right click from the center of this arc. And let's put this one now at that endpoint. And then we're going to go back here and we're going to zoom in tight to see if indeed, yes, it probably is the very same point. Okay. So they look to be concentric arcs. Now I'm zooming in and out by rolling the wheel on the mouse, by the way. And you can pan the drawing by pressing the wheel in and holding it and moving it back and forth. We didn't go over any of that yet. So,
I don't have that point way out there.
well, there's no point there other than it is the center of that.
So you put that far point in there?
No, here's what I did. I drew the line, just drew a 2D polyline. Whoops, that's 3D. I drew a 2D polyline and I said, okay. Now it says pick a point or a point number. Well, the point that I'm going to pick, there's no point number out here. The point that I'm going to pick, though, is a geometric point. It's going to be the center of this arc. Okay. So I'm going to right click or hold the shift key and right click and choose center snap. Okay. And now you see my prompt says snap to the center of, and if I pick on that, or if I hover over that arc portion, see how that lights up?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to go from there and I'm going to go up to the end point of it there. Hit enter. If I do it again, I'm going to repeat 2DP. So I hit enter. Now this time I'm going to hold the shift key and right click and choose center. And I'm going to choose the white arc up here in the front. And you see all of these arcs have centers. If I choose the center of that, if I choose the center of that, or right here, so that's the center I want. And I'm going to go to the end point of that line. Okay, now, notice when I'm doing this, that when I hover the mouse, see how I get the end point, midpoint, I get all these different things that pop up. Those are called running O snaps or running entity snaps or E snaps. And here's where they're set. I'm going to press escape to end that command. If you look down here on the status bar, and if you look at this little icon that looks like a square with a corner lit up on it, that's my entity snap settings. So if I click that and choose settings, these are all of the snaps that I have activated, and they're always activated. So if I don't want to get to an endpoint accidentally, I need to turn that endpoint off or temporarily turn it off by holding the shift key and right clicking and choose turn snaps off. When you hold the shift key and right click, you just are affecting that one particular mouse click. these are in effect all the time when I'm working. I have my endpoint, I have center, midpoint, so I could go to center of my circles and it would find those as well. As
No,
long,
my midpoint was shut off. Is that why I was struggling to find?
no, no. I just like midpoints because I sometimes I go to midpoints a lot when I'm doing it. You could get by with just endpoint. But if you want it on, just click it on and then choose OK. And now that's set. Okay, so now if you draw a 2D polyline, now anytime you just hover the mouse, you see that is a midpoint. Get closer to the end, you'll get the end point, closer to the middle, the midpoint, closer to the end. You'll pick up the end point, midpoint, end point. Now, these are individual little arcs, so that's an arc from the end point. There's its midpoint, there's its end point, but if I get right there, you see how it brings up the center? Because that's one of my active snaps. But you have to actually, find that point or specifically turn center on. Okay, but that's basically how, when I hover the mouse, I've always got those snaps on. And if I want to draw a 2D line and I want to go from here and I don't want to get that end point. I'm going to go to a point like right near there. But see how I'm off the line, but it's enough to catch the end point. So if I shift, right click and choose all entity snaps off, and now when I do it, see, it doesn't snap to that corner. But if I grip, and I'm just clicked in it with the left mouse button, I'm moving it around, and I hover, the snaps are back on. Because shift right click only affects that one particular click. All right, so that's selected. I will turn it off. Now there's another way to do those. There's a toolbar called Entity Snaps. And I have it on up here just to show you where it is. And you can turn these on and off by double clicking, sets it permanently. Single clicking sets it just for that one click. Okay, that's the same as if you've gone down here and chosen right click the icon and choose settings and then turn them on here. That's the same way of doing that, but that's on a toolbar called Entity Snaps. And you can set that toolbar by going to Settings, Toolbar, Setup, and pull this down and choose iCAD. So that you're using the IntelliCAD toolbars and turn on Entity Snaps. And then when that turns on, it may be floating out here. You can just drag it and dock it wherever you want to put it. Okay. Everybody good to go with that? Now, what we're trying to do is to establish the point midway along this arc. Now, it's not the midpoint of that arc because that arc goes further than just those 2 points, but we want to split right here between there and here so that it's along this radial line, because all of these lines go back to the center of the arc until you get to along a straight edge, and then it's perpendicular. So how do we create that point? And there's a couple of ways. If we draw another 2D line point or 2D polyline, I'll say, okay. Now notice I'm going to hover over here toward the endpoint. So now that's going to be the endpoint. So now where do I want to go up here? I can't go to the midpoint. See, that's the midpoint of the arc. So where I want to go there is set a couple of ways. This is the sort of complicated way, but it keeps you from having to draw stuff and erase it. If you hold the shift key down and right click the mouse, we're going to turn on this temporary snap for this one click, and it says mid between 2 points, the third one down. When I choose that, it's going to ask me for the first point. Look at the command line prompt. So I'm going to hover here and get that endpoint. And now it wants the second point. So I'm going to hover over here and get that endpoint. And that is the endpoint. And I'm just going to hit enter to finish. So that is halfway between that point and that point. It's the same as if I had drawn a line here and a line here. And then I went from this back corner and snapped to the end point of that one. That would be the exact same thing, but I did it without having to draw it. Okay, with me so far? Or if you're having trouble getting that snap, just, let's do it like this. I'm going to delete that. Let me try that. I'm going to do this another way. Let's draw a 2D polyline. And this time, instead of using the current drawing properties, I'm going to uncheck that. And the layer I want to choose, I'm going to hit the pick button, and I'm going to pick this lot line over here called lot lines. I'm going to say, okay. So now when I draw the line, it's going to be on that layer. Now it says pick a point or a point number. I want to make sure I get the end point of that line and the end point of that line. Okay, so that's now halfway across that angle. You could even have drawn an arc if you wanted, but there's no need because it's the very same point. The midpoint of this line is the same as the midpoint of the arc portion between those 2 points. Okay, so everybody have a line between those 2 endpoints? Or now that we know those curves are concentric, there's an even quicker way of doing that. I'm going to erase all of this stuff. And let's just do this. I'm going to draw a line, draw a 2D polyline. I'm on this layer lot lines. I said pick, and I went out and picked a line. And I'm going to go from this endpoint to this endpoint. And there now is the middle point of that line. Now, I could draw another 2D polyline and go from the center of this arc up to the midpoint of this line here, and that would give me that line. But let's do one even quicker. Let's draw a 2D polyline. So I'm going to right click, repeat that command, hit enter. And I'm going to now go from the endpoint of that line to the endpoint of that line. So now I've got 2 little squared off straight line segments between, right? So now let's do one more draw 2D polyline. And let's snap to the midpoint of the first line we drew and snap to the midpoint of the second line we drew. Now we have the line where we want it, but it's not touching where it's supposed to touch. So I'm going to now select these 2 temporary lines that I drew and erase them. So how do I get this line to come up and meet this arc? And how do I get this to not hit that arc? And the answer
There an
for,
extend and trim.
yep, exactly right. I'm going to trim and extend. So I'm going to select this line, the outside boundary, and I'm going to right click and choose trim, or you can choose it from the menus. And I'm going to just, let's see. What happened? I right click, choose trim. I choose this. Not working right. Let's see if I trim. Select the cutting entities. Enter. Now select the entity to trim. No entity selected. What do you mean? Huh. Got two. I got two things there. Let me see. All right, let's try this again. That is one entity. All right. So now trim. Wow, that's not working right. It left it in place. I'm hitting the undo button all the way back to here. Let me see what I've got. One polyline. So if I select this and, come on, this, delete them. Why that's not behaving correctly. Trim, here's my cutting edge. Maybe my edge mode is set to, no, wow. Well, that's the way it's supposed to work, is that should trim that off right there. So,
I was
Be-
able to trim and extend using that method. I'm not sure what's happening for you.
yeah, I don't know. There's some kind of setting somewhere that's, what version are you using? 25 or 24?
It's the 25 version.
Yeah, I wonder if that might be what's going on. All right, so let's go to,
It's on the 24.
I'm sorry, you say you did on 24 and it worked?
Yep.
Okay, so there's some setting somewhere in mine that's causing that to not work. So here's here's a Carlson version of that, is to, if you extend, it's on the edit menu, extend to edge. I think this will work. Select the boundary entities here and here. Select the entity to extend. And now shift select to trim. No, I don't know why. But anyway, there it is. That just doesn't make sense.
I'm having issues extending mine. Can you walk me through that one more time?
Yeah, let me undo that. Make sure I don't have a. Bring back. Let's see here. There we go, just one thing. All right, so under the edit menu, there is an extend to edge. And that's basically just the same as the trim command. You can lengthen, but that you have to type in a distance, I believe. But so if we extend to edge, now read the prompts, select the boundary entities. So I'm going to select this as one. I'm going to select this other one. I'm through selecting the edges. I'm going to hit enter to finish my selection set. Now it asks me this time to select the entity to extend. So I'm going to click closer to this endpoint up here. So that should push it out. And then you would hold the shift key and click the tail of it to get it to trim. Now, I didn't do that. I'm going to show you another way of editing this to get it to come back to that edge. If you select that and click, hover the mouse, click the left mouse button, you see how it moves? If I want to move that to right where that intersection was, I'm going to start moving it. You still see the ghost of where it used to be. I'm going to hold the shift key and right click. And I'm going to come down here and choose intersection point snap. It's not, let me see the elevations here. The elevation of that polyline is 0. Wow, it's just not.
I mean, it's on the layer of the boundary edges instead of the property corners instead of that exterior boundary.
This, well, there should only be two things right here, right? There's two polylines. One is on perimeter. One is on lot lines.
but they're at significant different elevations. So they don't actually intersect.
No, they're not. Where'd you see the elevations?
When you're clicking on them down at the vertex, oh, never mind, it's 0.
Yeah, it's 0.
What is the other one though? Oh, it's 0 as well. Yeah, I was mistaken.
So I don't know why that's not working right. Well, and even at that, like you should be able to take this and move it to and snap to the intersection, and that would work there as well. So if I snap to the, oh, that's why, because I said insertion point, not intersection. Intersection snap. Now there it gets to the intersection. Ah, boy. But still, the trim wasn't working right on this. I don't know why. All right, so now, how are we going to get our property corner points on those points? Is it going to be the same way as we did up here? So we're going to go to points, draw locate points. We're going to use the point numbers. So we're going to get 146 and 147. And we're going to put it on this layer name. And if I turn on descriptions, that will let me put in the description when I pick the point, but it will also show the description. So I'll leave that off for now. I'm going to screen pick and I'm going to hover to get that endpoint, hover to get that endpoint, and I'm done. So I hit enter. Now to get them in that right group, I'm going to just zoom in here and double click the circle. And for the coordinate file description, I'm going to type piece COR for that one. And I'll do the same thing for this one. PCOR. Okay, now that's a way to individually, and we look at our point group manager and we go back to our property corners and you should see now 146 and 147 are there. Now that was a way to individually edit those points, but you can also edit points from the point menu, edit your points, and that brings up the entire list. And you could have scrolled down here and put in that description right there and fixed that all up in the same thing and then saved and exit. Okay, so a number of ways to do all that. All right, so now we've got our property corners all set up. What else can we do with those property corners now that we have them all? Any of you surveyors? Let's see.
Size of each lot.
Jim, yeah, well, yeah, I mean, but you can do the size of the lots just by like this lot 81. If you do a area by interior point, see that right there?
That was under annotate.
Under area
Oh, area.
layout. And that's by interior point. Now it has to be a closed boundary for that to work. So those two were. So I could have done it that way. But you're right, you can use those points to do it. But when you do it by points, when you go around an arc, you have to make sure to tell it that that's an arced boundary. But what would you do if you're a surveyor and somebody's designed this and they said, all right, go out there and stake out my points? You go to your points, your point group manager, your property corners. Now, what when you do with that, you can report on just those on that group. All right, so these are all boundary and property corner points. You can save that as a file. You can This icon right here is output to the screen. And so you could put them there, and let's see, we'll just put it over here and click a point. And then when we exit, we now have all of those points that
Could you
include.
do that? Could you do that one more time?
Yep. I went to my points, point group manager. Here's my property corners. And so I can take those and go to points and choose report. So you see its range of points is already set for the group, or I could have just chosen list points. You see, that's the name of the command right here, list points. So I could have just picked point groups from there and chosen it. And, but I've got it here and I'm going to say, okay. And here now is my report. I'm viewing my report and I've got these tools across the top that I can do several things with. I've got menus. I don't know what these options are. Okay. And you can set the fonts and margins and all that. But the one thing that I've got is this right here that says output to screen. So when I choose that, I'm going to turn on to use multi-line text. So it's all one entity. Set my height. Now that has to be in drawing units. So that's 4 units. What layer? It's going to go by default to this report text. I'm going to use a particular style and which layout, either model space or any of the paper space. So I'm going to make sure it stays in model space. That's where we're working. And I choose OK. And now reading the prompt, it says start point or center, middle, right. And we're going to leave it left justified. So we're just going to go over here and click a point to start. Now continue reading the prompt and it says press enter to skip picking the second point with a rotation and place horizontally. That means if you just press enter, it will go horizontally. Otherwise, you can set the rotation of it. So I'm just going to hit enter. And now this comes back. Now nothing's over there yet until I exit the report viewer. And now this is created, but this is still up in the way. So I'll just say, okay. And now there is that list of points and they're drawn in my drawing. Now, again, it's just text. So you can edit everything. And let's do Control All and let's choose a nicer font here. And we'll click out of here. So now I've changed the font. Everything's there. It's all monospace, but I would have to do a little bit more editing, like, if I wanted to line these up, that one's already lined up. Here's one that you see what I'm doing. So you could do something like that. Let's put that one over here and then take this back a space. Now they're all lined up and we just click off of it and it's done. So that was one way. There's another. If we go to the points menu, list points, we still have our group selected. And if we say, okay, now that's all here, and this was output to screen, find, print, save as. So you could save it off as a file, or you can I see this export. Save as. I swear I saw export. Let's see, options. Huh. To screen. Nope. Oh, I know where I saw it. Never mind. Is back in point group manager. Sorry. So my property corners. Now I can go to export to a text file or to another coordinate file. So if I wanted to put that, I don't know what your guys use in the field. If you use Carlson survey or whatever it's called now, Serve PC, it will read a Carlson coordinate file directly. You could do it that way, or you could output it as a text file. And so you would use, you can set your format as to how you want it to go, either point number, northeast elevation description with spaces, with quotes around them, all these different kinds of things, or a particular format that would match a lot of survey equipment. Okay. So that's one way you could do it. You can also do something even easier to try to keep track of. Back under your list points. Again, we have a group, but this time instead of, I'm going to uncheck this range, and I'm going to come down here and say use report formatter. I'm going to uncheck the geodetic stuff. I don't have any geodetic information here. And I'm going to say, okay. And so now I've got, from this list of availables, I've got the drawing layer, the lock, what group it's in, an average elevation if I want, or I've got point number, northing, easting, elevation, and description. So that's going to be what it will use. I can subtotals and do all kinds of different things. And if I look at display, it's just going to show me like I saw before. But if I, let's see, we'll leave the headers on. Let's take the totals out. We're in columnars, and I can go to a spread view. This is like a spreadsheet. From which you can export to Excel, a CSV file or a text file. I'm sorry, that was XML. Down here's Excel. Different database formats. Okay, so you can do it that way. I'm not going to export it. And that was just from the spread view, or I could say, go to Microsoft Excel, go to import, export these to all those different formats. All right, so if I go to Excel, just make a new file. And here I am in Excel. There's my point numbers. From which I could do anything that I needed to do with that data. And notice when I kick it out to Excel, it keeps the full data, and these are just rounded off to the third decimal place. Okay. So then anything that I can do with that information, I can take that file. Now, what would I do with that file? Is give it to my surveyors and say, hey, here's some points. I need you to go stake these points out. Or you could even compute the stakeout for them. If you go to the Kogo menu, for instance, and choose radial stakeout, and I don't have any idea where my point numbers might be for these, but my occupied point number, see, I don't have any control points in here. Let's just say I use point number 1. And my backside point number, I had point number 15. Whatever it happens to be. My maximum distance, range of points to compute. Now this is getting all of those points. But if I select the points from the screen, I'll be able to get just those points. I'll use an angle right. I don't have any slope distances on those, so that's fine. I could even use a cut sheet format. And so now select the objects. And there's now my cut sheet. It shows me my point number, my angle right, my horizontal distance. Okay, occupied backside. There's my backside azimuth. And then I could have descriptions and all this kind of stuff. And that's my cut sheets for them to do. Or if I did the same thing, and this time instead of, I'll still select it from the screen, but instead of using it, I'll use a report formatter. Select my points. And now I'm going to get point number, northing, easting, angle right, and horizontal distance. There it is in my text form. Here it is in my spreadsheet view, to which I can export to Excel or a text file. Now I made it in a table. So I'm going to come out here and pick a location for the table. I'll just take the defaults. And there's now a similar way, but this is an actual table that you can use and append and all that kind of stuff. So 1 looking at 2, setting 15, I have a 0-degree angle right. So apparently that's right on line, 1 to 2 to 15. Okay. So all of that from using point groups judiciously, and you'll be able to then send those out, put them on a data collector, and they can go out there and stake the points. And you're not having to go in and click the endpoint, the endpoint, the endpoint, the endpoint, the endpoint. You can just do it all very quickly using those points. Okay, questions? All good. All right. I'll save that drawing. And we'll spend about 3 minutes here until we take a break. We'll just talk a little bit about where we're headed next. The next, this was all of that. And so now we're going to talk about making surfaces, how to do terrain modeling, how we're going to use the elevation to be able to create these surfaces. So what I'd like you to do is sometime between now and tomorrow when we start the class, if you want to just sort of skim through some of this, shouldn't take you too long, just a couple of pages. And it talks about this, and don't worry about if you run across any terms you're not familiar with. We're going to talk about all of that. But basically, what we're going to try to get an understanding of is that we're going to be building surfaces based on points and their elevations. And it builds a surface by creating a bunch of triangles in memory and stored in a file that define the surface that we're running on. So here's just two triangles, but you can see, you know, other surfaces like this up here. See, there's all of those different triangles are all edge to edge the same. All of those edges are common, but they have differing elevations, okay? And we use triangles in this process called triangulation because it takes 3 points at a minimum to define a planar surface. So you can see when this triangle forms, it's going to form a corner at elevation 110, drop down to 100, climb up to 110, and then come back to 110. So that will be level across there, but lower down on this corner. Same thing on this triangle. It's going to go down to 100, up to 110, and back to 110. So in the very simplest form, we could just take a bunch of points, grab them all together and say, build me all the triangles and turn it loose and let it build. And that could work except for a particular problem. And that is, if you look at this and you see this triangle, it goes from 110 to 110 and then it drops down to 100. Over here, it's 110 to 110, drops down to 100, okay? So these two triangles would actually run across this ridge line and flop down on the left and flop down on the right, okay? But now look at this same figure on the next page. The same 100, 110, 110, 100. If the triangles form this way first, it's 100, 100, and then it climbs up to 110. 100 to 100 climbs up to 110. So this would represent a little valley with sides 10 feet higher. And those are the same 4 points that we see here, but this becomes a little ridge with these points down below it on either side. So only one of those is correct, but the computer doesn't know which one is correct if all we're doing is using the points, and if we're allowing the computer to just figure it out, it's going to create one or the other of those, and we don't have any way of knowing which. It just, whichever ones it gets to first is how it happens. And we're going to talk about how we control that with break lines. Now, we're going to go through some of that stuff tomorrow when we come back to it. But when we come back from break at 3:30, I want to spend a little bit of time taking a look at this file that you see here. We have it as a sample file. It's actually compiled from aerial photogrammetry. And we'll take a look at it and see all of the different things that you're going to be able to use to create those surfaces. And we get some tools and techniques on how to evaluate some things that are in a particular drawing file that we might get from somebody else. Okay. So we'll do that when we come back from break. We're going to come back at, let's come back at 3:30. And then we'll wrap up the hour exploring that file and setting the stage for talking about surfaces tomorrow. Okay? Questions? All good? All right, I'm gonna pause.